you ejected from a jet at the speed of sound and it destroyed you. And then you went through this medical system. Of those two things, which was the greater injury?
I think the greatest injury to me came from that inpatient psych facility. It the physical stuff I could get over. I could bones heal. I can rebuild muscle, and even the nervous system, given the right conditions, can start to heal nerves. But the shit that happened to me mentally and to my soul in that place was far more of an injury than anything that happened in my ejection.
Welcome back to another episode of the Mops and Moves podcast. This week I was going to make some sort of jet reference, but I can't think of anything good. Alex, who are we talking to?
I don't have any puns handy either, unfortunately. Maybe something will come to us. We'll see. So this one's really cool. I'm honestly blown away by the story. We're talking to Kegan Gill, call sign SMurF. You'll learn a little bit about that during the episode. He's a former Navy F-18 Echo pilot. In 2014, he sustained devastating, and I really mean devastating, injuries from a high-speed ejection into the sound barrier. After over a dozen surgeries, 2 years of rehabilitation, and weaning himself off of a high-dosage pain medication addiction, he successfully returned to flying Super Hornets. That's particularly noteworthy given that right after the injuries, he was told it was very likely he wouldn't walk again. You'll hear about that as essentially chapter one of his story, but it certainly goes on from there. The comeback is long. It has some setbacks, all sorts of stuff. Today, he is an ultra endurance athlete, a motivational speaker, a veteran advocate. He's working on a book. He's raising his family. And he's on a mission to heal mind, body, and soul through alternative modalities. And the reason he's so passionate about that will make a lot of sense as you hear about the subsequent chapters of his story that I've kind of glossed over in this bio.
Yeah, and the story is, I mean, we've had some pretty cool people on that have done some pretty cool things, but I came across Kegan on social media telling his story. He's told it a number of different times on a number of different platforms. And it's one of those where you're like, this can't be real. Like, there's no way somebody goes through this, goes through what he went through, comes back from it, goes through more stuff, comes back. I mean, it's insane. So we reached out to him. He was super cool about coming on and talking with us. I will say that obviously neither Alex and I are pilots. And so there are other platforms you can find Kegan on, and we'll link a couple of these in the show notes, where the nature of the ejection, essentially, he goes into a lot more detail from like an aviation standpoint, which is fascinating. If you listen to some of the podcasts that he dives into that detail, you'll hear us mention kind of at the beginning of this that, I mean, the most flying I've ever done is like sitting in the back of a commercial airliner. So we stayed away from some of the technicalities of what it means to eject from a jet, much less what it means to eject from a jet at literally the speed of sound. So, I mean, this was definitely a guest where we thought, man, this is insane.
Yeah, Drew will remember this. When he first sent me Kegan's story, I instantly went into extreme skeptic mode. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded like movie plot ridiculous.
It sounded too bad to be true.
That's fair. Well, the comebacks from all the bad stuff sounded too good to be true. Borderline impossible kind of stuff. And me being me and being extremely skeptical about it, I honestly went down a rabbit hole of trying to prove that it wasn't true. Like, surely this was made up. There'd be holes in his story. And I started to think that would be the case when I searched like his name and tried to find the crash, and nothing was coming up in terms of a crash. And then I realized when the crash happened, the Navy did not release his name. So if you look up the details of like the date and location of the crash minus his name, you find all sorts of records that corroborate exactly the story Kegan tells. And once that fell into place and I started to look at other stuff, you start to find like comments from pilots he flew with talking about it. You start to find more and more that like backs up his story and proves it's all true. And it's when you guys hear him tell the story, you will understand maybe why I didn't believe it initially, because it is some absolutely incredible, truly inspirational comeback story kind of stuff. I think Kegan started telling his story publicly relatively recently. Honestly, I think he will be a household name in military circles fairly soon as more people start to discover him as he goes mainstream and things like that. So I'm just excited that we found him before he was too famous to talk to us.
And the other direction that this kind of goes in, and we don't we don't intentionally, well, maybe we do, but sometimes we don't intentionally seek to speak ill of the military kind of, medical community necessarily, but you'll hear from Kagan that he went through some stuff that you could argue was designed to make him fail, and was kind of forced to seek out sort of his own solutions to some of his problems. And again, kind of a fascinating dovetail that we go down towards. I don't remember what chapter we called it, 3 or 4, but if we've hyped him up enough, I think we're ready to go. So enjoy.
When I heard your story and when I discovered kind of that it's kind of like just getting out there, like people were just starting to learn your story relatively recently, last 6 months or a year or something like that, it seemed too good to be true, to be honest. Like I'm a cynic. I spent a bunch of time like trying to like, I went searching to like see if it was legit or not. And then I started finding news articles about the crash, and I started seeing stuff from guys who were with you during the rehab, and the story is pretty mind blowing in terms of all of that happening to the same person. It's crazy.
I honestly wouldn't believe it if it didn't happen to me in a lot of ways. I've had people on Instagram now be like, "Oh, you're fake. This is a fake story," and I'm like, "Well, if that's what you think, go for it." But
no,
man,
Drew has sent me stuff before. Drew has sent me stuff before where he was like excited about it and like, should we do this on the podcast or whatever? And like I spent a little bit like digging into it, doing the Intel guy stuff.
Yeah, it's because he's an Intel guy.
It doesn't seem legit. Like I have too many questions.
Yeah.
But like everything I check, I mean, at first I was like doubting it because I couldn't find early news articles about the crash. But that's because they didn't include your name in any of the articles. If you search the date and the location, you start to find all that stuff. They just didn't talk about who you were. But
yeah, I got kind of like a shaming in one of the local Virginia Beach newspapers where this guy, I'm guessing he was just hanging out at like Chick's Oyster Bar where everybody goes and drinks, and was like picking up on little rumors. And he wrote a whole story with just the wildest conclusion that like my whole accident was because I didn't do some computer training, and naval aviation training is all failing. And it was just.
You did do your cybersecurity training?
No, I did actually stumble across that article as I was looking some of this stuff up, but fortunately it does not match what the Navy said. So
yeah, it was yeah, there's some good ones out there. There was a really funny one the Australian news did. It had like a little computer animation of a guy like ejecting and like gently falling in the water and just being like hanging out, like waving. And it's like, that's not how it happened either, but good try on the high-tech CGI.
Okay, that's the perfect, that is the best segue we've ever had, because when I first heard your story, and again, caveat, I have no idea about how, jets work, but when you're sitting there about to, I'm assuming, pull the thing, do you know, like, as a pilot, because you would have gone through obviously the ejection training, like, do you know, like, hey, this is gonna hurt?
I mean, we've heard like ahead of time all the stories of people ejecting and the injuries that it causes. Even like best case scenario, we know that it's likely going to compress your spine permanently, that you're going to get flail injuries, broken arms, things like that are really common. But where I was at was just, I mean, it was just pure instinct survival mode. I didn't have the time to even think about all that, which is maybe a good thing because I just did it,
Yeah.
But we know as pilots ahead of time, if you punch out, it's not always going to go very well for you in a lot of ways, physically and the damage that happens after the fact. So it's not exactly what you want to have to do.
That's probably a good point where we should rewind a little bit and provide some context for some people listening here. I guess chapter 1, what happened to you? Like, how did all the stuff we're kind of alluding to here?
Yeah. So in 2014, it was January. I was stationed in Virginia Beach with VFA 143, the Pukin Dogs. We were a single seat F-18 Echo Super Hornet squadron, and I had been in the squadron just shy of a year. I was fortunately no longer the new guy, but I had played the big ears, little mouth role the whole way through my initial months in the squadron. So I hadn't stuck out really in any negative way yet, which meant I didn't have a call sign yet. And it just so happened for this flight, right before I was going out, one of the more senior junior officer pilots in the squadron came up to me and he's like, "Hey, man, you just haven't done anything dumb enough to earn a call sign yet." Also, my buddy Fisty was working the squadron duty officer desk that morning. And as a joke, he put up the airspaces we were going to be operating in that day out over the Atlantic Ocean, about 50 miles off the shore of Virginia Beach. And he used the Shark Tracker app to put up all these GPS tagged sharks that are out in the area. And he's like, "Hey, man, today would be a really bad day to eject because there is a 16-foot, 3,500-pound great white shark directly underneath your area. And her name's Mary Lee." Uh, and so we were joking about this stuff just before the flight. Get ready, go out. I had recently earned my qualification with what's called the JHEMIX helmet. It's a joint helmet mounted cueing system. It basically is like a big space age looking visor that wherever you look with your head, you can train your weapon systems as well as some of your flight information. It's a really cool system, but I was still kind of getting used to that new piece of gear. Anyways, I donned my dry suit because I was going to be flying out over the freezing cold Atlantic Ocean that day. We had an exceptionally cold winter in Virginia Beach, and the water temperature that day at the buoy out about 50 miles offshore where we were going to fly was at 37 degrees Fahrenheit, and the outside air temperature was below freezing. Got on the dry suit, all my gear, taxied out, took off, joined up with my flight lead, and we joined on another jet to check out an ARS refueling pod for some air-to-air refueling, which is you put out a little probe on the nose of the jet and plug it into this basket. All that went smooth. With some extra fuel and extra time in the airspace, we went out and we practiced high aspect BFM. It's sort of probably the epitome of what people think when they think fighter pilot is a couple jets trying to shoot each other down within close range of each other, dogfighting, which was one of my absolute favorite things. It was cool being in a Super Hornet because we get to do such a wide variety of missions. We get to do all the carrier borne stuff. So carrier ops day and night. We get to do air to ground stuff with close air support. That was the primary mission in the past 20 plus years of war where, supporting guys on the ground with close air support. We were able to employ a wide range of air to ground weapons as well as gun. We're also able to do the air to air role. So long range engagements all the way down to short range dogfighting and BFM. There's a bunch of other little niches that we can get into as well. So you're the jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing, which always keeps things very interesting. You never quite feel like you have a grasp on it all. But anyways, set up to do some BFM. I was out with my flight lead who had been fighting F-18s at that point for like a good 15 plus years. He was a Top Gun graduate. And it was like stepping in the ring with Mike Tyson. I knew I was going to get my ass kicked, but that's how you learn, and that's how the military likes to do some things: is have you just jump in over your head and figure it out. So set up. We did several rounds of this fighting. You can think of it like a round of martial arts. You fight until maybe there's a clear winner or loser, and then you reset and you start again. So we had done several of these fights, and we had hit Joker fuel, meaning we had just enough fuel left for one more round of fighting. And so we reset down to bingo with our bingo bugs, and we set up a little lower and a little faster than we normally did. No big deal. We were just trying to maximize our training time, and called 3, 2, 1 fights on, and pitched into a merge, which is basically where we cross paths going really fast in the opposite direction, kind of like two medieval knights charging at each other. And as we came to that merge, with the new piece of gear with the JHEMIX, I'm kind of focused on utilizing that piece of equipment, and I didn't quite fully realize the airspeed and altitude I'd gotten down to. We had started the fight normally almost 2 nautical miles above the earth, over 2 miles above the earth. So the ground wasn't an immediate concern of mine. But by the time we got to the merge, I had already gotten very fast with the jet, and I opted to roll nose low the rest of the way and continue my pull downward, which normally would have been all right. But as I hit bullseye nose low, which is pointed straight at the ocean, a system called the G bucket and the G limiter turned on in the jet. The aircraft thought that there were bombs on the wings that were not there. And so it limited the amount of G I could pull in the jet, which is the equivalent of going around a really sharp corner in a sports car and then having the steering wheel kick back part way. So I went from a nice crisp 7.5 G pull, feeling all that weight of my body coming down on me. I'm doing the AGSM or the hic maneuver where you're breathing the specific way to keep all the blood in your head. My legs are tight, my core is tight. And all of a sudden I just felt half of that weight or more lift off of me. And the effect of that, if you were going around a sharp corner in a sports car and having your steering wheel kick back halfway, you'd slide off the road. But in this case, in a jet, I'm in a dive and it essentially does the same thing. And so now I'm just stuck in this dive at the ocean. This all happens in a few seconds. I pull the throttle to idle. I put out the speed brake. And within a couple seconds, I'm just diving at the ocean. And my only option was to eject. An ideal ejection, you want to be well below 200 knots, straight and level. I was way outside of the survivable envelope of what you're supposed to be able to live through, but I had no other choice. So I reached down between my legs. I pulled that black and yellow cable, and it freaking rocketed me out of that aircraft. When I pulled the ejection handle to initiate the ejection, I was at 51 degrees nose low. So a steep dive. I was at 695 miles per hour, which was damn near the speed of sound. I was at the sound barrier, and hitting that airflow at that speed just tore me apart. I mean, it ripped off my helmet. It smashed my face all up, made my eyes swell up. My face was all swollen. I broke my neck. I broke my left shoulder. I broke both my upper arms. My right humerus tore through my brachial artery. And then my left forearm shattered in multiple places, severed nerves. I had multiple nerve injuries in my upper body. Both my legs were flailing so violently that my steel-toed boots essentially turned into maces and were smashing my legs open. So chunks of my tibia are coming out. I had two open tib-fib fractures in both my legs, and I was just a mess. Fortunately, by the time the ejection sequence had initiated and got me out of the aircraft, I had about a second and a half before I impacted the ocean. In that time, my parachute opened, slowing me just enough so that I didn't die on impact with the water. I ejected so fast that a majority of my survival gear had ripped off my vest. My dry suit had shredded open. I mean, it was almost tore the clothing off of my body. It was just so fast. The parachute had just saved my life, then sunk under the ocean current of the open Atlantic Ocean and started to drag me under. We have what's called a SMurF, which is a saltwater activated explosive device that connects the parachute to our harness. And the idea is when you go into salt water, it sets off a little charge so you can disconnect your parachute. In jet ejections, it's really common for guys to have flail injuries that damage their arms and shoulders in ways that they can't manually disconnect. So in the case of being in the open ocean, you don't want to be connected to a parachute because the damn thing tries to drown you, which is exactly what happened. So I quickly turned into a bobber. And if you've ever been held under by a big wave out surfing or had to do any sort of drown proofing in the military, or you just know that feeling when you need a breath of air and you can't get that, that's where I was for the next hour and a half, is just over and over, inhaling a lot of salt water, in and out of consciousness. I don't know how I didn't drown, but in the meantime, my flight lead was able to get the rescue effort underway. Eventually, a helicopter showed up, send in the rescue swimmer, call sign Cheech. He was able to cut free all the paracord and get me up into the helicopter. On the way to the hospital, I coded multiple times. They were just fighting to keep me alive. One of the crew members, actually, he was eating his lunch when they got the call for my rescue, and he threw this meatball sub like in the corner, half wrapped. And by the time they had picked me up and got me to the hospital, I was just covered in this dude's meatball sub. So, I was in rough shape, but I was also covered in marinara and like chunks of meatball. So I looked like just a gory mess. So they had to kind of explain that as they offloaded me at Norfolk General. Fortunately, they got me to a level 1 trauma center with the dream team on. When they took my core body temperature, I was at 87 degrees Fahrenheit. So I was 1 degree away from what should have been certain death. But they said that the hypothermia actually saved me from bleeding to death. Had my dry suit not torn open, I would have bled to death in my dry suit long before anybody got there. Fortunately, Mary Lee didn't eat me. And the whole time I'm in the water, like in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm going to get picked off by the shark, but didn't happen. Ended up going into an induced coma. They treated me for the severe hypothermia. I had blood transfusions. I had kidney failure. My kidneys were just overwhelmed with rhabdomyosis from all the tissue breakdown and trauma. Once they got me semi-stable, they rushed me in and started just doing all sorts of surgeries. I had to have fasciotomies on all 4 extremities for compartment syndrome. Because of the severe damage, all of my limbs, my arms and legs had just swollen up, and it was cutting off the blood circulation. And not too long ago, they would have just lopped off both my arms and both my legs, and I would have been a quadriplegic. And had I not been so close to such a good trauma center, that could have been the case as well. Fortunately, they were able to do fasciotomies on all 4 extremities to relieve that pressure and get the circulation going. They reconstructed my skeleton with titanium rods and steel plates, screws. If you see my x-ray now, it looks like Wolverine with all the metal bones. And miraculously, they were able to stabilize me. They ended up having to do a vein graft on my right brachial artery. Anyways, I was a mess. I was intubated. All my extremities were wrapped up. I had an external asphyxiator on my right arm. I looked just like a disaster. And I spent another week in a non-induced coma after they were trying to get me up. And at that point, they're kind of like, we don't know if he's going to come to. My squadron mates at this point, a lot of them are hanging out at the ICU waiting room, waiting to hear if I'm going to be all right. And Basil, the same guy who jinxed me at the beginning of the flight for saying I hadn't done anything to earn a call sign yet, was like, oh, he's a scrappy motherfucker. He'll be fine. And it kind of lifted the mood of the room. And that's how I became SMurF, I got my official call sign finally, is they took scrappy motherfucker and they shortened it down to SMurF as a makeshift acronym. And then it has to have a politically correct cover story because it's modern times in the military. And so it's because I'm a short guy who turned blue from hypothermia. If anybody above 06 asks what it is. But anyways, at this point, they don't know if I'm going to come to. They don't know if I'm just going to be a vegetable. And eventually the lights started coming back on. And as I came to, I thought the wool blanket over my body was made of lead or tied down because I could not budge it, but it was because I was paralyzed. And I was really out of it from the combination of all the drugs they had me on and the head injury. And, I was kind of like, hey guys, can you get a wheelchair and get me out of here? I got a bunch of stuff I got to do at work. I'll go home, I'll sleep this off, and I'll be ready to rock. And they're like, no, dude, you don't understand. You're going to be here for a while. Eventually, the medical staff came in and kind of laid it out like, hey, just to be real with you, you're likely never going to walk again. You're not going to use your arms again. Your military career is over. Your flying career is done. But something inside me was like, I'm just going to prove you wrong, go ahead and tell me I can't do something that just is fuel on my fire. And little by little, I started wiggling my extremities. Day after day, it was just kind of like, what can I scoot? What can I move a little bit? And after a couple of weeks in the ICU, one of the nurses came in and I was sitting up at the foot of the bed and she was kind of taken back like, holy crap, this dude is paralyzed and he's sitting up. I don't know what's going on, but they were able to transfer me down to Richmond, Virginia, where I underwent 3 months of inpatient therapies. I was doing vision therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, kinesiotherapy, recreational therapy, aqua therapy, like you name it. I was doing all these conventional therapy modalities. I was on a massive amount of painkillers, everything from oxycodone, OxyContin, amitriptyline, tramadol, trazodone, massive amounts of gabapentin. which was supposed to be a safer alternative to those, and it most certainly ended up not being. But anyways, I was in rough shape, and I was just trying to learn how to move again. I was trying to learn how to think again. I was a mess. And little by little, though, it was just kind of like, just keep at it. Just try to do what you can do today. What can you move? What can I do? And I took my therapies very seriously. And while the staff there was incredible and the people were motivated to help and they had a lot of nice equipment, there were certainly some shortcomings at the VA facility. And the biggest one, I think, was the food quality was just complete garbage, like, a step above MREs, but, somewhere around the range of maybe like prison food. The stuff gets prepared an hour and a half away, highly processed, reheated, shoved into metal containers, and then driven an hour and a half. And by the time it gets to you, it is just a nutrient void nastiness. And they're spending all this money on, all this equipment and therapists and all the drugs you can think of. But then when it comes to the most foundational things that your body needs to heal, one being the intake of food and nutrition you're getting is garbage. Two, you can't sleep because they wake you up all night checking your vitals and giving you medications to sleep, which makes zero sense. Anyways, it's not nearly what it was for the Vietnam era veterans coming back from a war that they didn't even sign up to fight, coming back blown up, beat up, shoved in a room with 12 dudes covered in bodily fluids, lucky to see a nurse once a day, pumped full of morphine, rolled out on the streets in a wheelchair, and then it's like, good luck with your life. We've come a long ways from that, but there certainly were some frustrations there.
I think that's kind of an opportunity, because I do want to make a point for everybody listening here. If that was all the story he had, it would be incredible. It would
wait,
like
there's more.
I think
We're just getting started.
That would give us plenty to talk about. That would be all sorts of material. We'd be good to talk for an hour on just the things he laid out right there, like ejecting at the speed of sound. Not that this is a record you want on your list, but if I'm not mistaken, that's the record for the highest survived.
Are you in the
exit
Guinness
from
Book
an
of World
aircraft
Records?
in naval aviation?
I don't know. I haven't talked to them. It's the fastest survived ejection in naval history. I know that there is one Air Force F-15 pilot, call sign Noodle. He punched out faster than that and survived back in the 90s. He was a F-15 pilot, and actually, Black Rifle Coffee just did a little mini series on it, or just it was maybe like a 20-minute documentary on what happened to him, which I highly recommend checking out. But I don't have the record for the fastest ejection. It was the fastest in the Navy, and certainly not a record that I don't think many people are trying to compete for anyways actively. Maybe, probably the Russians are like, we do that in training. We
got that.
We got to go out. We got to punch out at the sound barrier, drink some vodka, and push on. That's how you get into the flight school, But
yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
But what you got at here is the idea of, and you hear people talk about, like, we don't have healthcare, we have sick care.
Oh yeah.
And you're starting to touch on the topic of, there are a lot of things we know are good for like getting people healthy and keeping them healthy and things like that. And for some reason, the moment you enter the medical system, it seems like we forget about a lot of those, the food, the time outside, the physical exercise, the social connection, all of those things. And we start focusing on surgeries and pills and all of those things. And it sounds like you got a heavy dose of that.
No pun intended.
But the things that were really valuable in your process might not have been those traditional medical interventions. They might have been everything around that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly thankful for the trauma surgeries that they had and the modern medicine that went into kind of putting me back together initially. I mean, I think the abilities there that modern medicine brings are just incredible. And there absolutely was a place where I was very happy to be getting Dilaudid and fentanyl and oxy and all these things to help with the pain management. But after that initial portion, and then you're in the rehabilitation stage, and then the stage of chronic pain and things like that, that is where our modern medicine system is having major struggles. I think largely because it is a business. These things are profit-based systems, and that's what really makes the wheels go around at the end of the day. And so they want modalities that are going to be profitable. And oftentimes those things are not what's the best for your health. It's what's best for the business of health. So I certainly have a lot of frustrations. And, as you kind of alluded to, what it came down to was my decision to take it upon myself to stop there is no easy pill that you can take and get better. It's as simple as that. You really have to do a lot yourself to heal yourself. And the most important stuff that I was doing was, one, having a positive mental attitude that I could get better, then getting better sleep, focusing on the sleep, getting better nutrition, focusing on the food. Fortunately, I had people from the outside bringing me food in. Those things were essential. And then putting in the time and the effort into my therapy and physical rehabilitation. Once I got out of the VA, I was kind of set out, and I was doing outpatient therapy at that point at Naval Hospital Portsmouth, but majority of my healing came through things that were done outside of the clinic. And, that was getting active again, getting my buddies to take me out surfing, even though I could barely put on my damn wetsuit. My friends were taking me out mountain biking. I started PTing with a friend's wife who was a physical therapist outside the clinical setting. And she showed up day one of therapy. She had a Nalgene bottle, and all it said on it was "patient's tears." And so I knew she was going to kick my ass. But at that point, I was walking on a cane, and she snatched the cane out of my hands and threw it. And she's like, "I don't ever want to see you walk with that again." And then she whipped out a deck of cards, and just each face had a different purpose, but it was doing jumping jacks and sprints and burpees and push-ups and sit-ups. And we went through this whole deck of cards. And by the end, at this point, I'm still hobbling around on a cane, essentially, the day I showed up. And she just proceeded to kick my ass back into shape. But it was largely those things that started the physical healing for me. It wasn't the being in the clinics. It wasn't the drugs they were giving me, most certainly. I mean, I had to struggle to wean myself off of all those pain meds against the advice of my medical professionals that I was working with, because I think there's a lot of training that they get, a lot of information they get out of medical journals that are massively influenced by the pharmaceutical industry. Their medical school, their lessons that they learn are largely influenced by the pharmaceutical industry. And believe me, the pharmaceutical stuff has its place, but there is a little bit of imbalance there that balances towards making them profit vice what's best for patients.
Mm-hmm. This whole kind of, and I'll preface this story by jumping ahead and saying that you work your way back to flight status. And I want to walk through that journey with you because it's an important piece to this, which is that we see a lot of soldiers, in the Army example, but you see this with athletes too, I think, to an extent, where, an injury happens, severe, non-severe, but they become their injury. Like that becomes their personality. They define themselves by that injury. And it seems like in your case, you have a ton of horrific injuries, but from really day one, it's like, how do I move past that and get back to flight status, get back to doing what I love to do? And in some cases, going against what your medical providers are telling you to move through that injury. So like, how did you get to that point? Like, what did that look like for you to say, hey, you know what, you're telling me I'm never going to be able to do this again? That's going to drive me to do this versus, oh, this is just me for the rest of my life.
I think sometimes my skull is just really thick, I think. And I didn't identify as an injured person. I identified as a guy who's going to be a fighter pilot still. And that was my focus. And by staying focused on that and focused on what little step I could take each day, even if all that meant was I could, wiggle my foot, that helped me get better. I think it's really easy. One, from just the naysaying of the medical professionals who are kind of standing over you saying, hey, yeah, you're not going to walk again. You're not going to use your hands again. And so it's easy to bite off on that and then just go down to a very dark hole of depression. Not to mention a lot of the drugs they're putting you on do so much damage to your physiology in so many other ways. They might take away the pain a little bit, or at least make you loopy enough that that you don't feel as much pain or perceive as much pain. But the damage that that stuff does on you on so many other levels can really just put people into a dark hole. And I think I was just fortunate that I had not only just that internal drive from the get-go to prove them wrong in a lot of ways, but I also had a massive amount of support network around me, friends that wanted to get me back out. And the more you can start doing for yourself and the more you can get out and do to be like your old self, the better off you are. And don't let people tell you can't do stuff. At least try. Like, maybe you can't go out and ride your mountain bike yet, but maybe you can pedal a stationary bike while you're getting better, just coming at that from that approach of kind of what's the little step I can take to get where I want to be, vice, poor me. This is what I got. And now that defines me.
So thinking about exactly that and knowing that you had your eyes set on flying jets again, what did your training look like? What were the limitations that prevented you from doing the kind of training you might have done pre-injury? What were the things you focused on? What did that journey look like in terms of the X's and O's of getting back to the level you wanted to be at?
Yeah. So, I mean, pre-injury, which is actually, I think, a massive factor in what kept me alive was I was an avid CrossFit athlete. I was about 5'7", 180 pounds. I was regularly ripping out Frans and Murphs and could throw around weight on a barbell and do pull-ups and all this stuff that I incorporated into my day-to-day life that had my body at least physically robust going into that accident, which had I not been, I don't think I'd be here. But then on the negative part of that was once I was destroyed and I found myself trying to get better again. And I remember the first few times like being in the gym after the therapies and stuff and being like, this is so depressing. I can't even pick up a 45-pound barbell with nothing on it right now. So to go from where I was to that, was a massive blow. But I just started to focus on what could I do. And, once at first it was just, trying to relearn to walk with a walker, trying to relearn to move with a cane. And then as that progressed, it was just walking without anything. And then it became jogging on a treadmill. I remember my first time jogging on a treadmill at the outpatient physical therapy clinic. And I think I had it at about a 12-minute mile pace. And I was just dying. Like my max heart rate was spiked. And this is like slightly faster than a walk pace, and I was just hurting so bad. But I just kept at it. I just kept the regularity of little things. And that made a huge difference. I mean, I wasn't doing much weight, but I was at least doing something. I wasn't running fast, but I was at least trying to run. And I saw a lot of other guys in those clinics that were, not putting any effort into getting better. And maybe they didn't have the carrot of getting to go back and fly fighter jets in front of them that I think, was an advantage for me as well. But it was just little by little progressing with little simple exercises, be it jogging on a treadmill, being able to do push-ups again, air squats. I mean, a lot of it I didn't even need any weights or equipment for. But as that progressed, then it was just building and building. So as far as the X's and O's, it was very basic. It went from these 12-minute struggle runs to I was running, in 12 minutes, I was getting like a mile and a half in to, slowly increasing that pace to where I was in the physical therapy clinic a few months later and they had me wearing a freaking weight vest and I was going out running with the PT staff and they couldn't keep up with me. But it was just like those little steps and those frustrations that I just had to push through. But the regular exercise, even though it wasn't impressive by any means, and a lot of the days it was pretty short, everything was under an hour, but keeping at it regularly and then incorporating some decent food, trying to get the junk out of your diet as much as possible was huge. Some fruits and vegetables, some whole foods, some decent, quality meat, eggs, all that kind of stuff, was rebuilding my physiology and then getting off of all the pain meds. As brutal of a process as that was, going through these withdrawals, once I got all that stuff out of my system, I started to see a massive acceleration in my physical gains, and just my mental abilities got rapidly better. What little benefit that was giving me to reduce maybe some of the pain, it wasn't worth the trade-off for all the other debilitating effects it was having on me. But after 2 years of all this rehabilitation and just regular exercise, even though a lot of it was not terribly impressive, especially at first, after 2 years, I was able to max out the Navy's physical fitness test again, and I got to go back to fly.
I'm trying to piece all that together because I'm assuming, when it first happened, you were being told you'll never walk again. Certainly you'll never fly again. So did the system, and maybe by system, I mean Navy, maybe I mean the fighter community, I'm not sure, but like, did they support you through that and give you the time and the space to say, hey, look, he's decided that this is what he wants to do? Like, absolutely, like, prove to us that you can. Or was it more of an uphill battle for you?
No, I was really embraced by the strike fighter community. I mean, I couldn't believe it. While I was in the hospital, I was having like these nightmares, like, I'm gonna leave this and I'm this guy I just crashed in a jet. People are gonna think I'm this failure. They're not gonna want to have anything to do with me. Like all these just running thoughts in my mind that were not slightly in alignment with reality, but that certainly was in my mind initially. But once I got out, my buddy Fisty took me out to Chick's Oyster Bar, which is like one of the hangouts in Virginia Beach. And I remember walking in on my freaking cane still. And all the guys there from the fighter community are like, hey, man, how are you? It's so good to see you out. And it was like this warm embrace back into that. Like, holy shit, I can't believe you just survived that. And they were so happy to see me. And, the command was able to put me at a place where I had time and space to focus on my healing and my therapy. And I was so embraced by that and so fortunate. I still had to go through a FNAB, a Field Naval Aviator Evaluation Board, where they investigated everything. But once that concluded, I got the thumbs up to go back to fly. And that was just more motivation to get back at it. So I was really lucky to have a massive amount of support from that community and my friends in it.
So a brief sidebar question here. And again, I will say at this point in the story, I said this before, if that was the end of the story, it would be absolutely incredible. More so than the first part of the story. Just surviving the crash is an incredible story.
This
Getting
is
to
just
walk
chapter
again is an
2.
incredible story. Now we hear that he gets back to actual flight status. He's back in F-18s. That's absolutely ridiculous. And I will preface the rest of the episode by saying we are about at the halfway point of the story at this point. But I got to ask you,
yeah,
I'm mildly curious, and maybe the answer has something to do with there being like an $85 million aircraft at the bottom of the ocean somewhere. But why, after this like miraculous comeback and return to flight status and doing all this stuff, were you not just like the poster boy of the Navy for 2016? It feels too good to be true there.
I mean, there was certainly, there were so many people that were, just stoked to see me back, and I earned a tremendous amount of respect, from a lot of the more senior guys and the instructors. Once I went back into training, there was certainly just an inherent respect for what I had been through and overcome and gotten back. So, to them, I kind of was, the sort of beacon of hope for people, kind of like a freaking, was it Rudy, like just keeping at it no matter what. And so I guess I kind of was a little bit inside that community.
That's awesome.
I was blown away. I know I said this earlier, but when I bumped into your story for the first time just a few weeks ago, given that all these things happened years ago, it's stunning to me that more people haven't heard this, to be honest. I think it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I just really started sharing this starting about a year ago. I did my first podcast and really started to come out of sort of the shadows of everything and talk about it. But, Yeah. I'm happy to share it now. And so, yeah, I mean, I got back in the cockpit. I went through refresher training in the Super Hornet syllabus. I graduated the top of my class out of that. I got the River Rat Award, which is sort of like he's a fun dude to hang out with outside the cockpit as well award,
He's
which
also a
I'm
cool
more
guy.
proud of that. He's pretty fun to hang out with.
Yeah, he's cool.
And so I was back on top, like I felt unstoppable at that point. I ended up getting stationed with VFA 136, the Nighthawks out in Lemoore, California. And I was back at it. I was back in a fleet squadron doing cool stuff. And we were down in Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida doing a weapons fire exercise. We were there at the same time the Hawaiian Raptor Squadron was there, which is, I mean, that's got to be like the coolest
Yeah.
flying gig ever. You're flying Raptors out of Oahu. But anyways, we're there. I got to go out and do a live fire of an AIM-9 Mike Sidewinder heat-seeking missile at a drone. And then after I fired the missile off, I joined up with another dude in his mid-20s flying an F-22 Raptor, and we got to do what's called DACT, or dissimilar air combat training. So we were dogfighting, these two pretty incredible fighter jets against each other, and we hadn't even hit our 30th birthday yet.
Who wins that fight? An F-22 or an F-18?
Man, it's all about the pilot.
Yeah.
I've got F-18 buddies that, they've got HUD footage of them gun shooting an F-22 Raptor with a very pissed off Raptor pilot, I'm sure, in it. In reality, in real world combat, F-22 Raptor is probably going to smoke us before we even know they're there in modern warfare. But when it comes down to a dogfight, if it, all else being equal, I think both stand a pretty good chance. In my fight, I was more in awe in watching this thing with its directional thrust move like a freaking
Oh yeah.
alien spacecraft than I think I was thinking about tactics. And unfortunately, we only got one really quick set before we had to head back. But
Sorry, real quick, because we asked this to we had a general on who's an A-10 pilot, and I asked him this, and I have to ask you this as well. Have you ever gone inverted with a MiG?
I mean, if I ever got the opportunity, would I? Oh yeah, for sure. How tactical viable that would be, I'm not sure.
As a
It's
follow-on,
definitely good for foreign relations.
have you ever cruised down a runway on a Ninja while an F-18 takes off next to you, heading into, I don't know, a school or something like that?
I mean, I need to just get a Ninja so I can go drive around by the airport and get that shot for myself to put on Instagram. But actually, a fun fact: one of my friends and who was one of my instructors when I was going through flight school, call sign Vern. He's actually the pilot who flew that same in the new Top Gun Maverick movie. He
Mhm.
got to fly that iconic scene with Tom Cruise in the new one. So if you see that, that's Vern crushing
Hey,
it.
Vern, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, but sorry, I interrupted you because you were about to get into how, well, I guess we'll call this chapter 3 of where the story goes.
Yeah. So, miraculous come back flying. And I'm coming back from this flight. I got to do some dogfighting with a Raptor. And as we're flying back, the pilot he keyed up on our attack frequency. He's like, yeah, the F-18 or F-22 makes even the most average pilots look awesome. And I was like, man, just as the thought, man, that guy is so humble for a Raptor pilot went across my head. He immediately keyed up and goes, but I don't have that problem. And then we proceeded to come back in for like the slowest break possible. I guess the Raptor guys had gotten in trouble for bringing too much heat back to the break. So we were like a sub 300 knot break, which in a fighter jet's very slow. Anyways, went back to the debrief of those guys. They were awesome, awesome bunch of dudes. And as I was watching my tapes, though, I realized there were massive chunks of that flight that I had no memory of, which normally I had a very solid memory. And so that was a bit concerning. I went back to the hotel and thought I would just maybe sleep off whatever was going on. The next day I just had duty. So I was, answering the radio, coordinating the flight schedule, sitting at a computer, answering phones for most of the day. So low stress. And as the day went on, I just got feeling worse and worse and just kind of pushed through to the end of the day. And when I got back to my hotel room that second night, like I had really bad vertigo, which I had never had before. I had just crazy anxiety. I tried to get to sleep. I could not fall asleep. And so by later that evening, I knew something was wrong. We had had a widespread problem in the F-18 community with what's called the environmental control system, excuse me, the ECS malfunctioning, which causes random pressure fluctuations in the cockpit. So if you're a scuba diver, you understand if you go down to depth and you come up too rapidly, you can get the bends or decompression sickness, which is basically where the nitrogen in your blood that's normally in the solution of your blood can come out of that solution and form these little bubbles. And if they get in your joints, it's really painful. They call it the bends or type 1 DCS. If you get that in your brain, it's called type 2 DCS, which can be fatal. It can cause cognitive dysfunction. It can cause like an aneurysm essentially, and it can even kill you. So that was one of the first things that went through my mind of maybe what happened. Maybe I had a pressure malfunction in the jet, and this is just the residual effects. I contacted the squadron safety officer. We headed to Mayport Dive Base, which was fortunately like 20 minutes away, and they had a hyperbaric chamber. And I proceeded to spend the next night in that chamber getting squeezed. And I went from the sort of like zombie light, dizzy, very flat personality that I was going into it to sort of feeling a little bit better and cracking jokes with the diver by the end of it. But, I wasn't good yet. And I tried to get some sleep again once I got back after the squeeze and wasn't able to sleep. And so the next day I went in to see that same doc at the dive base, and he's like, hey, based on your medical history, maybe this was decompression sickness, but we don't know for sure. When you get back to California, I need you to go in and see medical. And at this point, I'd been through so much to get back flying. I had this stack of medical waivers that were a miracle in themselves that I even had those. So the last thing I wanted to do was to like jeopardize my career again. But I knew something was seriously wrong. And the last thing I wanted was to jack myself up, to crash a jet again, to hurt somebody else because of my inability to address the issue. So I went and I saw the flight surgeon when I got back. I quickly got sent to psychology department, and not long after I had a diagnosis of delayed onset PTSD. And so they kind of bit off on the mood stuff I was dealing with, the insomnia, the sort of hypervigilance. And as the insomnia got worse, a lot of those cognitive impairments got worse as well. I went through the ropes of the conventional therapies for that. They had me doing CPT and some of these other sort of clinical based therapies, and they weren't really doing anything at all. And I continued to get worse. And before long, they started giving me medication again, which was the last thing I wanted after fighting off of all that crap they had me on before. But it was the professionals telling me, hey, this is how we deal with this, and this is how you're going to get better. And so reluctantly, I started on some of that stuff. I remember going in to see my XO, the second in command of my squadron, and sitting down across from him in his office one day while this is all going on. And I was kind of like, I don't know if flying's going to be for me anymore. And he kind of asked what was going on with the psychology folks and the psychiatrists. And I told him a little bit, and he's like, oh man, they've already sunk their talons into you. And at the time I was thinking, talons, aren't they trying to help me? But he already knew at that point, once they start you on psych meds, you're going to go down a path that's not going to involve flying anymore. And so things continued to get worse. I started to get increasingly paranoid to the point where I was afraid to go near the windows. I thought I was being hunted by government assassins. I thought I was in the Truman Show, essentially. Like, I thought everybody was recording my conversations and listening to me, and the radio station or the TV station was tuned specifically to me, and people I interacted with out and about were actors, and I was just like being watched the whole time. I stopped eating and drinking largely because I thought it was being poisoned to kill me. And before long, I was in a really dark place. The more of these medications they gave me, just the worse and worse I kept getting. And retrospectively, I had this underlying unresolved brain injury, but instead it was being treated as these emotional issues and PTS, which maybe was a slight component of it. But unfortunately, the underlying causes of what were really making all my dysfunction be the way it was were just getting exacerbated by these medications. They had me on a medication called Seroquel or quetiapine. It's an antipsychotic medication. They initially started me on that because it's good for insomnia at low doses. But as my body got used to it, they just had to keep upping the dose, and I got into this vicious cycle of the medicine's not helping, exacerbating the underlying problem, and then just having to up the dose and up the dose and up the dose. And before long, I was in full up psychoses. I was out of touch with reality. I became suicidal. One night I was ready to put a pistol in my mouth. I was so broken. My career was gone. My wife had just had our little boy, and she's laying in bed with my little boy. And the only thing, that kept me from putting that pistol in my mouth and put myself out of my misery was I didn't want to wake them up. So I was just in an awful place. And the more help I tried to receive from that conventional system, it just got me worse and worse. I ended up going through a medical board, which, was a nightmare in itself. I eventually was medically retired. And once I had moved back to Northern Michigan with my family, my wife heard me rustling around one day. She came in and she found me. I was completely naked. I had shaved off almost all of my hair in chunks. I had shaved off my eyebrows, what little facial hair I had at the time. And the only thing I had on was a black plastic garbage bag tied around my neck like a cape. I thought I was going to go out into the snowy Michigan winter weather and fight crime like Batman or something. So quickly, my wife called the VA. The VA said, "Hey, we're hanging up and calling the police." And by the way, this happened within a few days of them increasing my dose of Seroquel from 300 milligrams a night to 450 milligrams a night, which for people that know that medication, that is a heroic dose of this crap to be taking every night. And this was the result. Was I was in a out of my mind psychosis. My wife rushed me to the emergency room. I ended up being an inpatient in the emergency room. Had an incredible, out of my mind psychosis, out of body experience. They ended up taking me down to the VA inpatient psych facility in Battle Creek, Michigan. And I had just an awful experience down there with, you think of the things you need when you're at the lowest point in your life. And I was at the lowest point in my life. I was in a psychosis out of my mind. All I really needed was some sleep, some decent food, maybe some easy exercise, some connection with friends. I needed to get outdoors. All the basic things that you need when you're in a really bad place is just sort of like some time to just relax and enjoy those basic things of life and reestablish those things. And unfortunately, at this psych facility, almost none of those things were present. The food that they're giving you is just at the other VA hospital is just this nasty, highly processed junk that has little to no nutritional value. There's hardly a fresh fruit or vegetable in sight in this place. They wake you up every 15 minutes with a flashlight in your face. And to begin with, it's not an easy place to sleep. It is, it's loud. There's other psych patients freaking out, running up and down the hallways and yelling. You have other people in your room with you. It's not an easy place to sleep. The hallways are all hard tile with hard walls and painted bright white with bright fluorescent white lighting. And all night, things echo up and down that hallway. And your doors in your room don't go all the way down, and they have a window in them. So all that sound and light just pours into your room. And then every 15 minutes, they come and shine a flashlight in your face to verify that you're awake or safe. So, if you took an elite military member in the best of shape and you sent them to survival school where you wanted to give them the experience of being a POW or captivity, you would sleep deprive them. You would deprive them of nutrients. You would confine them. You would restrict them from exercise or being outside. this is all the same stuff they're doing to American veterans that are in the worst place in their freaking life trying to get better. And if that's not intentional, then it is massive, just next level incompetency. And everything there seemed to be designed to funnel you in to just taking more meds, because the one thing that they had in plenty, all you could take were all of these psych meds that they had everybody loaded up on. And as I saw this and I had a lot of lucid moments in there as well. Granted, a lot of the time I was out of my mind in a psychosis, but I had lucid moments and I had a chance to converse with some of the other guys there that were also in more of a lucid state and getting better or coming out of their psychosis that they were in that brought them there. There were several guys there who, through their battles in the world of being a disabled veteran, a lot of them had been homeless, dealt with drug addiction issues, and many of them had been in and out of prison. And all of them that I talked to agreed unanimously that they would rather be in prison than be in the VA's inpatient psych facility that we were at. They said the food was better. You get left alone in your cell to sleep at night. You get to go outside and exercise every single day. Where we were at, we were lucky to go outside once or twice a week. There was no exercise. It was just a freaking nightmare. And so the longer that I was there, the more frustrated I became. I even planned an escape. I started collecting warm clothes. I started collecting food, and I had a plan that I was going to pull the fire alarm. And when they took us outside for the fire, I was going to make a run for it. And one night came where I was just fed up with it. This woman kept shining a flashlight in my face all night, and I had it. I was either going to kill somebody or I was going to get the hell out of there. And I ran up and I pulled the fire alarm. And somebody must have tried that trick before because it didn't work. Mike, one of the head nurses there, who I actually really respected, who was really good to us, came out with a big syringe of Haldol. And he's like, hey, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And so I just kind of bent over and jokingly was like, hey, just stick it in my ass, Mike. And he shoved this needle and injected me with Haldol, which immediately felt like freaking insects were crawling underneath all of my skin, trying to tear their way out. All I wanted to do was rip my skin off and run and yell and scream up and down the hallways. In short, it was a torturous experience. And that's what they were doing to try to help me from one of the worst points in my life.
So this was a part of your story that struck me when I read it before we had you on. One, because I had never heard of Haldol, and for the audience's sake, some of the listed very common side effects are muscle spasms, losing control of your eye movement, uncontrolled twisting of the neck, trunks, arms, and legs.
It's so
like
nasty.
Tongue rolling out, just like absolutely insane stuff. And it kind of underlines the overall thing of like this facility was referred to as a mental health facility, and coming back to like the healthcare, sick care thing, it flies in the face of everything you think of when you think of health. And I know they're trying to like control this, but it basically seems like a system for isolating people that they don't want like the real world to have to witness anymore. And it just sounds terrifying.
Yeah, it is not a place of health. After they injected me with that Haldol, which was absolutely torturous, miserable experience, they then started to force more drugs on me that I didn't want to take, but they finally had just broken me. And I started taking their drugs. And while I'm in this just drug-induced stupor, literally drooling on myself, can't think for myself, just a malleable little piece of goo floating around this place. They put me into a room with a lawyer who was supposed to be my legal representative. And she had me signing documents, legal documents. I had no idea what they said. I had been voluntarily admitted to this place, but through signing those documents in the mental state I was in, it committed me to the facility, so I couldn't leave even if I wanted to. It also deemed me mentally defective, which means I am now I'm on the law enforcement information network, like as if I had committed a felony, despite not ever having committed a crime. I haven't ever been violent. And I also am no longer allowed to purchase a firearm. So while in this facility, the place I went to get help, I was confined, tortured, drugged against my will, and then I had my constitutional rights stripped from me, which is just absolute madness.
Hold on, let me ask you, and I don't mean to tee up on like the VA here, but maybe the question will end up doing that. You ejected from a jet at the speed of sound and it destroyed you. And then you went through this medical system. Of those two things, which was the greater injury?
I think the greatest injury to me came from that inpatient psych facility. It the physical stuff I could get over. I could bones heal. I can rebuild muscle. And even the nervous system, given the right conditions, can start to heal nerves. But the shit that happened to me mentally and to my soul in that place was far more of an injury than anything that happened in my ejection and all of that I had to deal with. So yeah, I was just broken and drugged. And eventually, fortunately, my family got me out of that place with a lot of advocacy for me. Fortunately, my wife is a nurse. My mom is a retired physician. My dad worked in healthcare, and they all came together and were like, we will take him in, because they could sense that this place was not doing me any favors. And I was begging to get out of there. Eventually, I got back home. I remained in that psychosis for a good 6 months before I started to come out of it. But the way that happened wasn't because I was in that facility anymore. It was because I was back home. I was outdoors with my little boy. I was around people that loved me. I was eating good food again. I was getting more rest. I wasn't being harassed all night with a flashlight. And little by little, I started to come out of the psychosis at least, but I was just, as I came out, I was just a broken human. I mean, whatever spark that was me, whatever was my soul before, just seemed to be gone. I mean, I could barely do the dishes. I was just constantly miserable and depressed and negative. My little boy would come up to me and tug on my leg and wanted me to show him something, and I would just ignore him or just yell at him at times for no good reason. I was just a negative force in my family, and I was on the verge of divorce. My wife had been through hell trying to deal with not only the psychoses and the medical board and the VA system. It was a freaking nightmare, and it seemed like it had been designed to just destroy me and break our family apart and leave us in a bad spot. And with what little cognitive ability I had left, I started trying to read a little bit. I still was trying to get out on my mountain bike and ride some. I was trying to run, but running with the medicine Seroquel in my system, I mean, and some of the other stuff they had given me at the site facility, I couldn't hold like a 15-minute mile pace without feeling like I was just dying and my heart was going to explode. But my buddy Matt gave me a book called Finding Ultra by Rich Roll. And it's all
Mm-hmm.
about how he had gone from being this, high-speed corporate lawyer with a great successful career, but just neglecting his health for all those years, and had become, the sort of out of shape, miserable human that he didn't want to be. And in that book, he shares kind of his journey through the use of a lot of whole foods and healthy lifestyle and exercise, went to becoming this successful ultra athlete. And so that kind of sparked some things in me. Reading these books was a struggle. I could read maybe a paragraph before I would forget majority of what I read. So it was a very slow process, but I was able to get through In Defense of Food by Michael Pollan,
Oh, I
which
love
is
that book.
it really unwraps, the whole world of our food system, our industrial food system in the United States, which was really eye-opening.
Holland's got several fantastic books that people need to
Oh
read.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then the next one that was one of the most transformative was also Michael Pollan, which was How to Change Your Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I started to get into the world of psychedelic medications and how massively impactful and beneficial that was to people. And so I read that could help with mental health. And at this point, I was desperate for anything because I knew what was getting done through the VA system was not the answer. I tried it. I was going by their playbook. I was taking their drugs. I was doing what they asked of me for years, and I was just getting worse. So I took it upon myself to find a legitimate guide, and I was able to do a psilocybin journey. And that didn't, I'm not saying it magically fixed everything, but it gave me a new view of what was all going on. And that was when I was able to recognize the correlation between the increase in the medications, especially that Seroquel, and the degradation of my health, and how I just continue to get worse despite going up and up and up on this stuff. And so Michael Pollan's in the book, How to Change Your Mind, he uses the analogy. It's like the fresh snowfall on this mountain of your life. And after the psychedelic event, it's like you have this fresh snow on your mountain. And instead of having these ruts of negative emotions and behaviors, those get filled in a little bit, and you get an opportunity to take some new lines in your life, in your mental health, in your behavior, in your mood. And so I started to do that. And I started against the advice of my VA psychiatrist, against the advice of even my own family. I started to wean myself off of Seroquel. I discovered an organization called Vet Solutions, which is run by a former Navy SEAL named Marcus Capone and his wife Amber. And they offer psychedelic healing to veterans, largely from the special operations community. I wasn't that, and I applied anyways. I didn't get into their program, but they started sending me emails, and I soon found out about an organization called Warrior Angel Foundation, run by Andrew and Adam Marr out of Houston area. Andrew is a former Green Beret who went through a lot of the same mistreatment that I did through the VA, being drugged out of his mind, going through a lot of these terrible events, and then later discovering a different way to deal with it, a way that actually worked. And his brother Adam is a Apache helicopter pilot. They formed this Warrior Angel Foundation, and they invited me down to Texas, and I was invited into this massive community I didn't even know existed. There was SEALs and Green Berets and MARSOC and a lot of these military guys that worked at the levels. They couldn't even talk about what they did, but you knew that they had seen some real shit. And they all had similar stories to me. They had different ways of getting their injuries, from IEDs and RPGs and gunshots and gunfights and a career in that high stress environment that those operators work in. But it had put them in the same category of people with PTSD, and they were all medicated, and they all had these stories of the medications just destroying their lives. But then I realized, and I had this, for the first time, I had this sense that I was right, that the professional psychiatrists, they were misleading me, that my family, even though, they only wished the best for me, they were wrong in trying to keep me on those medications. And I found of all these modalities. And from that event in Texas last March, I was welcomed into this community. I started doing podcasts. I started speaking out about this stuff. And I also was welcomed into this whole world of VSOs, these veteran service organizations that provide healing to veterans that actually helps you heal, vice what's available through conventional medicine. Jesse Gould from Heroic Hearts Project, he invited me to Peru to do an ayahuasca ceremony. That was hugely healing of my soul that had been so disregarded and crushed through conventional medicine. And I had so much hope coming out of that. I ended up going to Defenders of Freedom. Donna Cranston out of Dallas invited me down to Resiliency Brain Clinic, where I did 2 weeks of these modalities for brain injury. And I was finally, for the first time, having my physiology looked at. They were looking at my blood work. They were looking at the underlying causes of my mental dysfunction. There's Dr. Mark Gordon, who also works with Warrior Angel Foundation, Dr. Michael Lewis, and their take is like, we have these PTS diagnoses, and that's largely focusing on the mood, but the underlying physiology that's often caused by TBI or even chronic stress of life can cause damage to your brain, like a brain injury, like a TBI. But by addressing the underlying physiology through things like nutraceuticals, through some of these alternative modalities that I was fortunate to experience, people are able to heal their brain, or really just put the brain in the ideal conditions to heal itself, and then you get better. Whereas the conventional approach is throw all these medicines at things to mask the symptoms, but in the meantime, the underlying causes are exacerbated, prolonged, and in the long term just crush you. And while that's beneficial to the pharmaceutical industry's business model, it is not beneficial to the patient whatsoever. And unfortunately, the pharmaceutical industry, at the end of the day, they set the policies that the VA has to implement. You know, I talked to a guy who's worked at the very high levels in the VA, and I was asking him, why is it like this? And he explained, at the end of the day, those policy decisions, no matter how well intended the people at the VA are, and they are, you know, there's so many good people that work in that world, but at the end of the day, they're being crippled from the top by the pharmaceutical industry, who uses the VA as a massive cash cow to use their products and sell their products to the government and make massive amounts of profit. And for them, you know, it's a business decision. They're a corporation. They have these financial obligations to their shareholders. But at the end of the day, there's been these little exceptions made over time and time to favor the business, and the ethical side of it gets kind of brushed under.
Do you, and I think you may have just answered this already by explaining some of the policies behind it, but like, you know, because I've heard this too, this whole idea of alternative medications, alternative treatments being way more successful than what you would argue would be a conventional approach. And you would think and hope that, like, you know, somebody like, or something like the VA would lean into that, because not only are they dealing with, you know, injured individuals, but it's like injured service members. So my question for you is, like, do you see, given everything you've been through and everything you've now learned, do you see a world where like the VA adopts alternative medications, or do you think that it's just so bogged down in the politics and the business, like you talked about, that it's a non-starter?
It's frustrating because right now that I know what I know there are all these modalities out there that are effective, and not only just for the VA to implement them, but if I had gotten the treatment I got at this brain clinic this past June, at that resiliency brain clinic for 2 weeks, I didn't do anything crazy there. I did transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is just a Tesla coil they put on your skull and pulse it. I did a lot of it was just with a popsicle stick with stickers on it, following it with my eyes, a lot of balancing, a lot of things just like pressing lights while saying categories of beers or whatever. I mean, a lot of the stuff it didn't require incredibly expensive equipment. If they could take a place like Resiliency Brain Clinic and have that on every military base, so when guys do start to have their struggles or come back from a deployment, they go in and they do 2 weeks of this rehabilitation, and it's like a tune-up, you know. We could do this stuff preventatively. And then for myself, for example, I'm this F-18 pilot with millions of dollars of training. I'm starting to have my struggles. Had they taken these routes, I would very likely still be flying. So instead, what happened to me is, one, they have to spend all this money on the medications and medical treatments and all of that. But then there's the disability, the medical retirement, the loss of my experience from the military that could have been so valuable for me to be able to, you know, still be there with my experience, sharing that. It's just, there's so much money and so much benefit to implement these things. But as I kind of alluded to earlier, there's so much sway by the pharmaceutical industry. They are just such a force that can use all of their wealth. You know, they have sway at the FDA. If there's something that threatens their business model, they can have it made illegal through that sway. They can buy up these technologies and crush them. They can threaten people that are creating these technologies. You know, they have so many different ways to minimize these things seeing the light of day or being available. Do I think the VA is trying to push? I know there's a lot of people at the VA. Dr. Robert Hoffman, you know, he's this incredible doc that has worked pretty high up in the VA system, and he's a huge advocate for psychedelic medications. there's no doubt that that stuff, entheogens in general, are the future of healing mental health issues. And honestly, they're the past of healing mental health issues.
Hmm.
They've been used since before recorded history for the mental well-being of people, for the well-being of people's souls. And the fact that so much of that has been disregarded in modern medicine has been massively detrimental. And I think a big part of why we find ourselves in this mental health crisis, not only in the military, but everywhere right now. I mean, mental health is a disaster right now because we're not really treating the underlying conditions in the ways that we could be and that they're out there because of a massive amount of corruption, not only in the pharmaceutical industry, but in the insurance industry as well. I think things are going to change. It's going to take a lot of people pushing for it and talking about it. I'm so thankful for you guys taking the time to talk to me and get some of this out there and maybe get on more ears. And I think the way that this is going to change is kind of from the ground up. I think it's going to come from the demand of the people. It's going to come from people being educated on it and maybe having it, some of these things lose their stigma. And you know, the psychedelics are one just little piece of this puzzle. There's so many other modalities out there that are just not available through the VA or elsewhere. That should be. And I think in time, maybe we can keep that fight going and push it that way. But there's going to be one hell of a fight to do so, no doubt.
Well, Kegan, this is absolutely incredible. We do see the darkness settling in around you. We've kept you for a good hour here, so we're gonna start moving towards a closer. We really appreciate your time. The one thing I want to ask, especially for the context of our podcast, all being all about health, fitness, wellness kind of stuff. You mentioned the psychedelics piece. You mentioned the modalities piece. Thinking about just the lifestyle piece, you've been through the ringer both physically and mentally at this point, but you're maintaining a high level of function, a high level of fitness, a high level of wellness and activity. What are the most important components of what you're doing day to day right now that maintain your health, both physical and mental?
Yeah, I mean, the most important foundation of everything is your sleep. Um, I can't recommend enough. There's a book by Dr. Matthew Walker. It's called Why We Sleep. It's something every
It's a
human who
classic.
has any interest in your health should read. I think he also has a podcast. If you're more a podcast kind of guy, I highly recommend. He gives you some practical tips for improving your sleep, regardless of what your lifestyle is. As a foundation, that is it. If your sleep is off, it doesn't matter how much you work out. It doesn't matter how many supplements you take. It doesn't matter what psychedelics you do, all the other stuff. If you don't have sleep going on and you don't work to get sleep figured out, all that other stuff is going to fall apart. So that's the foundation. Upon that, it's what you put in your body, and you don't want to put the junk in it. I don't know if you picked up a loaf of bread recently and read the ingredients, but it's not freaking bread most of the time. It's got like 37 ingredients of stuff you can't pronounce. That's not food. If you pick up something and you can't pronounce it, it's got names you can't read. It's got colors in it, numbers in it. That is not food. So getting yourself back to just eating real food. I don't care if you're vegan, paleo, carnivore, just get something that's real freaking food and not this fake crap because you know, as corrupt as the pharmaceutical industry and the medical world and the insurance industry, our freaking food industry is a disaster.
Hmm.
And it's crushing people's health. And you see it on the streets nowadays everywhere, you know. People who are like, why I can't understand why I'm gaining weight, why I'm sick. There's so many things in our day-to-day food that I think most people just don't realize are poisoning you. So get as much of that stuff out. Eat just real whole foods. Majority of your shopping should be done in the produce aisle. If you can, if you're a hunter, get out and get wild game. I know that's a luxury and not everybody has that time or ability, but try to find meat that comes from a source that's not an industrial facility where these things are living in a CAFO. Eating a sick animal that's been tortured its whole life does a lot of harm to you as well. So, I mean, there's just so many things you can do with your nutrition. And if you're looking for a good entry point, the book In Defense of Food is a good place to start with that. I'm sure you guys have some good recommendations. I know you guys are really into that world. Also, just what you drink. Drinking water, clean water. If you're drinking soda, stop that. You're hurt. You're poisoning yourself. Occasionally, if you want to occasionally have a beer, occasionally want to have a Coke, like, yeah, that's not going to kill you. But if you're drinking regularly, if every day you end the day with several alcoholic beverages, and then you need several coffees to get you going in the morning, that's jacking up your sleep in crazy ways. So cutting a lot of that out can be massive.
I know we're trying to close, but I was rattled the other day to learn that roughly 1 in 7 new energy drink products are so caustic that they cannot even be packaged in aluminum cans because the lining products that companies use cannot contain the acidity of the beverage. It'll just eat
Oh,
through it.
Don't name brands because people that listen to this will go out and seek those out intentionally. Be like, oh, dude, that's what I need. If it eats through that can, that's what I need. That's the good stuff.
oh, oh yeah, having your body in an acidic state, that's a great way to
Oh man.
cultivate disease and crush your gut microbiome. So yeah, really like the foundational things. You don't need to go to a medical clinic for these things. You don't need to spend a bunch of money to do these things. Sleep, food, water, fresh air, get outside, get some exercise, whatever you're into. You don't need to go crush yourself. You don't need to be an Olympic lifter. You don't need to be completing ultra marathons. And honestly, if you're somebody who's coming out of serious injury like I am, doing extreme exercises actually can have a lot of negative effects on you. So really, I mean, if you can get 20 minutes of decent exercise a day, be that go for a nice little jog, do some push-ups, do some squats, do some lunges, do some sit-ups, pull-ups if you can. Just incorporating 20 minutes of that into your day at a moderate pace is going to do wonders for you. You don't have to be the frickin' gym warrior who spends 2 hours at the gym lifting. And if that's what you're into, awesome. But these are all simple little things. And if you can just pick one of these things to start with, maybe instead of having 4 cups of coffee in the morning, you just have 3 and start with that. Just start somewhere and do little bits to chip it away and improve. And if you can make little consistent steps in the right directions, you're going to look up back in a year and you're going to go, holy shit, look at me in the mirror. I look better. I feel better. My sleep is better. My cognitive functioning is better. My memory's better. When you start incorporating all these things, you're going to unlock the superhuman that is kind of within all of us that gets crushed, through modern society, through modern food, through just the lifestyle so many of us choose to live, the drinking, the partying, the alcohol, these are all personal choices. If you want to be superhuman and feel awesome, just take some little steps in the right direction. You'd be surprised where you end up in time.
Well, Kegan, I know that you mentioned that this is a message that you want to get out there, kind of your journey and what you've found through this and your own research. And so I wanted to give you the chance as kind of the last one here to say, like, where's the best place people can find you? Where's the best place you would direct people if they wanted to learn more about this type of stuff?
Yeah. The easiest way to reach me is probably on Instagram. On there, I'm at Kegan SMurF Gill, which is Kegan is my first name. SMurF, just like the Smurfs. And my last name, Gill, like the fish, Gill, all one word. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm just Kegan Gill. We can probably put a link to the in the description of this to those, but I'm happy to answer questions from people, genuine questions from genuine human beings, to help you and maybe guide you in a direction if you have any specific questions. And yeah, there's a massive amount of resources out there that can help you get going. And the place I would start is just educating yourself and picking just maybe 1 or 2 things to start incorporating in your life. I'd be happy to share any of that. Please reach out. Please ask me questions. I check that stuff pretty regularly and I'll get back to you for sure.
Well, Kegan, this was fantastic.
Awesome. Well, hey, man, thanks again for coming on. Yeah, this has been, I can't even pretend to understand what it would be like to go through all that and then arrive where you're at now. So this has definitely been inspirational. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, guys. And yeah, as a positive note, a year ago I was in a rough spot, but now I'm rebuilding my family. I'm athletically back at it again. I just completed a an ultra distance mountain bike event that's supposed to be the hardest single day mountain bike race on the
Hell yeah.
planet. I'm writing a book. I'm doing motivational speaking. I've got hope again. I've got good things happening in my life again. But it all really started with having that hope and not listening to the naysayers.
Awesome.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsinmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.